Welcome, stranger. This video is different than my other videos. It's not necessarily about a camera, but how to adjust the exposure on a camera and how to do it with a, let's call it a homemade setup. How it all started is a commenter on my channel asked me how I could set the exposure on his Canon without a tester, and it stumped me at first. The tester, I have 4 testers and they all cost over $1,000 and they're used. So I thought back to when I was an apprentice in a shop and learning, and the shop had a tester, but I wanted one to put on my desk. Of course, I couldn't build a shutter tester, but I could build a tester for setting the exposure. Simple enough. So I went down to an electronics shop and bought a metal box and a socket and a fan, a switch, and a voltage regulator. And brought it back to the shop and installed the socket, put a 55K bulb in it, put the fan on the box to keep it cool, and the switch, of course, on-off switch, and the voltage regulator. So I could turn the bulb brightness real dim or real bright. And the last thing I had to do was go to a glass store and buy some acrylic opaque white plastic and put on the front of the box so when the light hit it, it would kind of spread out evenly. And I guess that was about it. I don't know how professional it was, but it worked fine. I had a handheld light meter. In fact, I had several, so I used them to calibrate the light level for EV15. EV15 is a common level that camera repairmen use to set the exposure on cameras. Unless the camera's got problems in the low light situations, which can happen, then you sometimes have to change it down to like an EV9 to check the camera and set it. But EV15 is what you normally would use because that kind of covers the whole middle ground of exposures. And cameras only have one adjustment anyway, so you've got to pick an EV number to set the camera for. And then the other areas of the camera as far as exposure just have to fall in because there's no other adjustments on cameras except for that one adjustment. So anyway, I set my box for EV15 and lived happily ever after. Anyway, years later, I bought my first tester. They were expensive, and I didn't have a lot of money back then. And this commenter on my channel, and for you, this is how to build a homemade exposure tester for your camera. And it's not exactly like the one that I built, but it'll work just fine. In fact, just before I made this video, I went ahead and put one together and tested it to make sure that it would work, and it does work fine. So that's what this video is about, is to show you how to set up a homemade rig to set the exposure on your camera. And there'll be some difficulties along the way, but I can't do everything for you. So anyway, let's get started. Okay, we're recording. This camera that I've got pointed at this was made for taking pictures on the desk, not off the desk. So this picture here that it's taking is slightly, well, it's not level. And the microphone's going to act up a little bit too because it's in the wrong position too. But this is good enough to make the video with. This is a Spectron tester. Back when I was learning to repair cameras around the 70s, these cost $7,000. This is analog. It weighs about 70 pounds. Something like this could be put in a handheld unit today, but back then this was Star Trek technology. Star Trek was like what, 68, 69? This was something back then. And when I saw one on eBay, I just had to have it for old time's sake. So I bought it and put it on my desk, and I use it daily to set the exposure on cameras, even though I have a digital unit which is more accurate. So let's flip that on. Window lights up. You'll be doing something similar when you make your home unit. This window here tells me my EV number that I'm setting the camera for. I change the EV number with this dial here. This dial up here, if it's at 0, it means the camera's in perfect. Come on. The needle sometimes jump. If it needs to be at 0 to be perfect exposure. If it's to the right, it's overexposing, and if it's to the left, it's underexposing. Let's see here if I can. There we go. I don't have it exactly perfect. It's getting some extra light, but you can see now. Maybe if I do it like this. Now it's still going to be off a little bit. When I take a picture with this unit, it should be exactly at 0 to be perfect. Right now, that's a little bit overexposing, but some stray light is getting in around the sensor. And that's about it. It's set at 100 ASA. And I like using it because on a camera, I can tell more what's going on by looking at these analog needles than I can a digital, which just gives me numbers. I can see immediately if it's under or overexposing. I can see immediately what EV it's at. So in some cases, analog readouts actually are much easier to read and understand, even though they aren't quite as accurate. Anyway, that's enough of that. Now I'm going to show you how to check or calibrate the exposure on your camera. So let's get started. I decided to use this large panel here, although it's much too large for your needs or what you need to check your camera, but it's all that I had. So, got this huge panel, flat, and I made a light box, as I explained earlier back in 78, but this is the same thing and much better and much cheaper too, for that matter. There's you've got your LEDs in there. This particular one I think is around 96, and you've got your controls here and here for 2 sets, and you need to set this panel for EV15, and you use these adjustments here to set it. It's the same thing I do in my Spectron. I dial in EV15 to check the cameras with. And exposure value is kind of hard to explain. I've been using it all my life, but I don't really think about it. I looked it up, and it was invented by Friedrich Deckel in '54, German engineer. Introduced the EV, or exposure value system. This system aimed to simplify the process of setting correct exposure by combining shutter speed and aperture settings into a single value. The key word here is combining shutter speed and aperture setting into a single value. Okay, that's enough of that. It's beginning to sound too much like a school class. And so when you set your panel, setting it for EV15, you're setting it for a value of 15, which can mean several things on a camera. In other words, exposure. I'll show you in a minute here what I'm talking about. But first, let's turn this thing on. And if you will see here, you'll see that they're both set at 30. The reason they're set at 30 is because I started out at 99 and dialed down, down, and down. And I kept checking it with this, I don't even know if you can see it. Not very well. This is a handheld meter. And I kept checking this light over and over again until it measured EV15, which is what I want. That's how you set it. Now on my Spectron, turn this off because it's too bright, messing with my Sony. On my Spectron, I just dial in my EV. The machine does it for me. Of course, I had to pay $1,000 for it to do that. But you can do the same thing by buying a handheld meter off eBay. I don't know what these sell for, probably around $50. I bought mine back in the 70s for about $75, which in today's dollars would be about $200. But going to go close up here. Bear with me. If you will look, this EV system being handy, point this is the meter, and it represents the needle inside. And inside, across the top, and I can't show you because there's no way of showing you, it has a row of numbers all the way from 4 to 17. And on this, as I pointed it at the panel, I kept turning down the panel again and more and more and more until it finally, the needle pointed at EV15. And that's where I wanted it. So once I pointed at EV15, then what? Well, to check my exposure meter, I set my camera for f16, 125 at ASA 100. But I could also set the camera for 22 at 60, or 11 at 250, or 8 at 500. That's the beauty of EV, is that it's measuring light, and it's at that light it's saying, okay, any of these settings in your camera will give you a proper exposure. Because if you understand photography, you understand it's like adding 2 cups of water. It's the same, you get the same exposure counting whether you have a really small aperture, or over here you have a 2.8, a really large aperture. So the middle ground is the best. In other words, the shutter speed, 125, is usually going to be your most accurate shutter speed. And f16 is pretty consistent throughout lenses. In other words, it'll be the same from lens to lens to lens. Because you might have one lens that's a fast lens and one lens that's a slow lens, and there might be a slight difference. So f16, 125 at 100 at f15. So what next? Well, you've set your panel at EV, and I'm looking around here. Okay, EV, maybe put this like that, this like that. EV 15, and you've it's ready to go. We know the panel's right. In other words, the light coming. Now we need to set the camera, and we set the camera at 125, f16 at ASA 100. Okay, now the camera's set right, in the sense that according to Mr. What was his name? Frederick? Anyway, who did the math, this right here, in combination with this light setting, should give you perfect exposure. Well, how do you know? Well, after you set your camera for this and set your panel, and you look through here, on this particular camera, there's a circle and a needle, and they should match. Oops, I've got the wrong camera here. What happened there? Okay, sorry about that. The target, as we call it, and the needle should be perfectly matched up if everything's working right. If they're not, if the needle is slightly, let's say that circle is this speed control here, and it should be, and I've got the wrong, well, let's try this one. Sorry about this. I'm organized. This right here, no, let's go over here. This is a circle, and there's no numbers on it to confuse us. And that's the target, and there's your needle. It should be dead center. But let's say it's not. When you look through the viewfinder, what if it's up here? Well, then you got a slight problem, because the panel's right, and the Mr. Frederick's math is right, and the settings on the camera are right, but your exposure meter is not centered the way it should be. In which case, then, on the Minolta series, this control down here is the adjustment for the meter, which is very handy. If they put it on the bottom, you can reach it real easy. In other words, you just stick a screwdriver in there, you turn it left or right, and keep turning it to where when you look through the viewfinder, your needle is dead center of the target. So, I don't know. I've been living with this all my life, so to me it makes perfect sense, but I don't know about to you. Maybe you can do some reading or just watch the video again and absorb it. But it has the Spectron tester that I have is the same way, except that I don't have to use a handheld meter. It has what am I trying to say? It has a meter built into it, and all I have to do is just turn the knob and set it for EV 15, and I'm ready to go. But in your case, you have to use a handheld meter and adjust your light source. So that's the only difference between this setup that you're using and the setup. And I've tested this camera on both, by the way, and they were both identical. And what? Was the camera accurate? No, it wasn't actually. The needle is riding right on top of the target, right here, on using this crude system of a light panel and a meter, and putting it on the Spectron, $1,000 Spectron. Still, the needle is right up there on top of the target, and it needs to be adjusted with this pot right here. And before I send it back to the customer, I will adjust it so the needle is dead center of the target. Now, that doesn't mean that the camera exposure is perfect. Even though a meter is dead on, the speeds could still be off slightly. They could be a little bit fast or a little bit slow, and under or overexposing your pictures, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about allowing you to set your meter. Shutter speeds, there's no shortcut. You've got to have a tester for those. But this is something you can do yourself. And it might be nice to know if you don't want to go in and adjust your camera, like on the Canon FTBs and FTQLs, the adjustment is here, and you have to remove the top cover, and then after you remove the top cover, you have to put the speed control back on. You don't have to put on the advance, and you don't have to put on the rewind knob, but you do have to put back on the speed control and engage it to where it's properly timed, and then set it for 125, 100, and F16. And you have to adjust this pot right here. There's two of them actually on some of the cameras. One normally is a battery check, and one is exposure. It's not really bad. If you pick the wrong one, you'll sense it soon enough, because you change it, this exposure control will not change, in which case you're moving the battery check. And battery checks are, it's funny, none of the battery checks on the mechanical cameras are correct, because they're all set for the 1.35. And I never even bothered changing them. I don't think most people use them anyway. So I really wouldn't worry about it if you've got a Canon. The Nikons are a little bit different. There's different models, but sometimes there's a mechanical adjustment right here that you can turn to adjust the exposure on your Nikons. And there's an electronic pot here on the side of the prism that you can adjust if this is not enough adjustment. And then with the OM1s, they're kind of weird. Of course, that whole camera is weird. Get over here. This whole cover here is the ASA on the OM1. And when you remove the top cover, you remove your ASA knob. But underneath it is the small lever that this top cover engages. And so what you do is you lift the top cover off very carefully, put some tape across that lever at the position it's in, because you don't want it to move. Then there's a screw here which releases the adjustment. The adjustment is locked in place, and the adjustment is right above it here. So in other words, you tape it, your ASA, to make sure it can't move. You back this off slightly. It's a right to release the mechanism, and then you come up here and you turn your screw left or right, and you adjust the needle inside and get it between the brackets. And that's how you adjust an OM1. Sounds complicated, but once you look at it, you realize how easy it is to change. And the same method. You point it at the panel, which you know is correct. You know it's already set for EV15. And you've got your camera set up here on the OM1. You've got your speed set for 125. You've got your lens set for f16. Up here on the ASA, you've taped it down so it can't move. It should be set for 100. And so you start moving that screw until you get your bracket dead center. And then you put the top cover back on. And well, of course, once you do get it right, you want to screw this back in, not too tight, to lock the mechanism so it can't change. Remove the tape, and then put the top cover back on. There's what are those things called? PDFs? I forget now. Terrible things like that. On Google, on manuals, service manuals, and just operation manuals, and they will show you where the adjustment points is for meters on these cameras. You only all of them just have one. The OM1 has one adjustment. The Canon has one adjustment. The Nikons have two adjustments. One mechanical, one electronic. The Minoltas have the one electronic right here, but they've all got a place. Now, later on the electronic cameras, sometimes they had two adjustments, but on these old mechanical cameras, usually they just had one adjustment for the exposure meter. People tend to overrate the exposure meter, and they think that their pictures will live and die because their exposure meter is not just right, or their battery is not right, when in truth, and this is coming from somebody who used to be a serious photographer, any photographer who's, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings out there, but if you're really serious about photography, you shouldn't even be using the meter in your camera. You should be using a handheld meter, and learn how to use it, and target your shadows and see what you're getting, and target your highlights and see what you're getting. Decide what kind of picture you want, whether you're going to be exposing for highlights or shadows. And especially if you're doing black and white. But if you're doing slides, definitely you need something like this. The prints, the people, whoever you have who's printing up the pictures, can confiscate, can, what is the word I'm looking for? It's getting late here at night. They can fix, here's a simpler word, under overexposure up to a half stop. Compensate. Is that it? And so prints are not that hard, although, like I said, if you're serious about your prints and your slides and your black and white, you definitely want a good handheld meter. It doesn't necessarily have to be a spot meter, but I prefer spot meters because you can go up and you don't actually have to walk up to your subject and get, a few feet from it and hold your meter out. With one of these, you can meter quite often from whatever position you had to be at, because they have the one spot, or the I told you it's getting late. The angle, the degree of one degree spot, and I used to own one like this. This one here, I don't know where it came from. It was in my shop, and I didn't use it because I don't photograph anymore. But I put batteries in it, and it's working fine. Checked it on my tester to make sure that it was still accurate, and it is. So, what advice? Advice. Don't depend so much on the meter on the camera. When the manufacturers make these meters, I won't say it's an afterthought, but it's not their main objective. They're more interested in shutter speeds and design and lenses and focus. And yes, they put the meter in, but I've been in there and I've seen these meters and I've worked on them. And they're made in let's say, a very simple fashion. They're not very complex on these old mechanical cameras. Where something like this, the company that made these, this is their product. In other words, if it's not accurate, word will get out real quick and nobody will buy them. So they put all their effort and all their energy into making the best handheld meters they can, and they're much more accurate than the meters and cameras. And this is what you should be using for what it's worth. And if you don't want to adjust your camera, the exposure meter in your camera, you don't have to, but it's still a good idea to buy yourself a light panel and buy yourself a handheld meter of some kind, and check your camera to see if it's under or overexposing. And even if you don't intend to do anything, adjust it, because you can always compensate with your ASA slightly if it's not off much, and then you're dead on. If it's overexposing a half a stop, well, then you can adjust your ASA to where it underexposes your film a half a stop, and then you're dead on. So you don't actually have to go into the camera. So, I don't want to be here all night. I need to stop. I'm not used to making these type of videos. Buy your panel off Amazon. Buy a small one, a cheap one. It's adjustable. That has enough light to reach EV15. Go to eBay. Buy yourself a good handheld meter that you trust. It's in good shape. I prefer the kind that take batteries myself, but you can do as you wish. I've had both. And then make this little setup. Get your panel in. Get your meter at, adjust it for EV15. Get your camera, put it on a block, set it for 125, f16, ASA 100, and look through it and see what your camera's metering. If it's slightly over or slightly under, that itself will tell you a lot about your camera. Make you feel better about the camera too, so you can trust it. Okay, that's it. That's the video on how to calibrate the exposure meter on your camera. When I started this project, I was all fired up, which at my age, that doesn't happen too often. And I thought, what a great idea. Yeah. So anyway, now that the video's over, I'm kind of let down. I can't imagine many photographers want to remove the top cover off their camera and go to Google a service manual on their camera, find the exposure adjustment point and adjust their meter, and then put the top cover back on. That's probably an all-day job. It's something I do every day, but for the average person, that's probably I was asking too much or expecting too much. There's some DIYers out there, but they're sparse and in between that would probably can use this information. At least you won't have to buy a tester or send it to a shop if you don't want to. So I guess that's about it. Video's over. Hope you enjoyed it. Later.